June is Youth Month in South Africa. This year the theme is Skills for the Changing World, empowering youth for meaningful economic participation. Youth Month honours the bravery of the young people who rose up on June the 16th in 1976 to protest against the use of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in schools. Their actions marked a turning point in the struggle for equal education. 2025 marks 32 years since that fateful day, with this year's theme, New Challenges Face the Youth of Today. Well, today we look at inflation in the context of the theme, which is skills and education. Consumer price inflation was 2.8% in May, unchanged from 2.8% in April. The Consumer Price Index, the CPI, increased by 0.2% between April and May, slightly below the South African Reserve Bank's target range of 3 to 6%. Well, let's welcome our guests today. We have Dr. Mpumuzi Makeleni, economics lecturer at the University of the Western Cape, Zethu Qele, financial planner at Investec, and Katlego Kabela, economics lecturer at the University of Johannesburg. Thanks so much for joining us today. Well, we're going to start off with our first guest, Dr. Mpumuzi, and ask you, is the South African Reserve Bank's approach of inflation targeting working for South African youth who are just starting out in the workplace and thereby navigating being consumers?
Am I audible?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I just want you to confirm if I am audible.
Yes, you are. Would you like me to repeat the question?
All right. No, I did get that question. Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
The South African Reserve Bank is actually doing its work very well. Remember that the work of the South African Reserve Bank is to protect the value of the currency in view of balanced economic growth and also sustainable economic growth. Within that ambit of their constitutionally enshrined responsibilities, they are doing well to protect the economy and to protect the incomes of the consumers. With that being said, though, has been established within literature that the current range that they are targeting in terms of their inflation targeting regime is quite high compared to other emerging economies. But what is good and what we have been able to find is that the Reserve Bank understands that, and they are actually considering lowering that rate, the bandwidth, to actually a lower bandwidth, which is they want to target a target point now instead of a range, a target point of 3, which I think is a good development.
I'm going to move on now to Zethu Qele, financial planner at Investec. Would you agree with that?
So I would say in order for us to determine an inflation target and whether it's working, we'd have to consider firstly what the purpose of the inflation targeting is, which is primarily to keep prices stable. And I think the government has done a very good, or the South African Reserve Bank rather, has done a very good job at making sure that prices are stable, especially over the past few months that you've seen them kind of manipulate the interest rate to make sure that prices remain stable with an inflation rate now overall, of course, that's just below the target. But when you look at food prices, of course, that is the main commodity that consumers purchase, specifically the youth. To say that, does it work for the young people of South Africa, especially with one of the highest unemployment rates in the world? It would have to be a question of whether or not our young people are able to afford the things that they do buy. And we know that there's a big problem here. So I think there's greater work to be done on how the inflation targeting framework can further be developed to target the areas that most affect the ordinary consumer.
And then Katlego Kabela, also economics lecturer at the University of Johannesburg. What are your thoughts on this?
Um, in all honesty, if I look at South Africa's inflation rate, I would say it's been working because it's been between the target and it hasn't been above the target. It's always been between 3 to 6%. However, if you compare it, just like what you said, with the rest of the developing economies, I would say that it's not working because the cost of living in South Africa becomes too high due to this inflation. And at the same time, according to the study by Deloitte, majority of the millennials and the Gen Z, they do take on second jobs because of such inflation. Because we know that high inflation means that interest rates are high, and at the same time, the cost of living will be high. So, from my side, I'd say that it's working in terms of the target that they've set for South Africa, but in terms of comparing it to other, underdeveloping economies or developed economies, you can see that the inflation is not really working.
Thanks very much, Katlego. And then on to Dr. Mpumuzi. What solutions are there to reduce the pressure of the high cost of living for South African consumers?
All right. We would have to first establish or find the cost drivers or the inflation drivers when we are looking at the consumer. So in this case, we find that the main cost or inflation drivers are actually the price of energy or electricity. Secondly, the price of food has also been quite stubborn. Included in that, therefore, or as a result of that, we can also look at the price of transportation as well. So I believe that the government actually needs to expand the scope of zero-rated goods, and they actually need to look at the fuel prices quite closely, especially the levies and the tariffs that are on that fuel price. South Africa, amongst the SADC countries, actually has one of the highest costs of fuel prices due to those other taxes that are being levied on the fuel price. Just to end, I think one of the things that we need to focus more on is actually addressing the stagnant economy and unemployment, because those exacerbate these issues due to the fact that consumers do not have an ability to absorb any shocks within the inflation rate spikes or even just the rising costs of goods in general.
Thanks very much. Well, I think you have covered that quite adequately. So I'm going to give the next question to Zetu Cele from Investec. How do you think inflation affects young people's financial stability and future planning?
I think if you look at the trend on spending and saving over the past few years, we've seen an increasing number of credit card usage and the increase in credit card limits. We've seen, I mean, practically speaking, if you look on social media, there's an increasing number of young people talking about, they'll be in a line at a club, wherever it is, and they'll take their savings account to spend. And that, although it's a social conversation, that speaks to a lot of the kind of crisis that we were facing, the inflation and the state of the economy that we're in and how it affects young people. So we're at a point where we're looking at young people seeing this life, what we call lifestyle inflation, where they're looking at this life that the rise of digital age, marketing, and everything like that. So they're looking at this lifestyle and thinking, okay, I'm going to be spending like this. So even if we look at the kind of the measures that have been put by the government to decrease interest rates in order to stabilize inflation, I mean, we're looking at a 2.9% or 2.8% now, rather, inflation rate. But at the same time, we're not seeing spending decreasing. We're not seeing saving increasing. We're seeing a large majority of young people aged about from 1 to about 35, taking money out of their retirement savings, out of this two-pot system that was introduced last year in order to fund short-term expenses. So if we're looking at the way that it's affecting young people, it needs to be a deeper conversation into how do we specifically make sure that it not only works at a macro level, that it not only works for the durable consumer goods, it works for the day-to-day consumer, it works for the young people. So when we look at future planning in terms of our young people, we're at a point in time where we're not seeing a focus of young people on future planning. That's retirement, that's investments, whatever it is. We're seeing young people moving away from that and very much focusing on current spending and no savings at all. So that's a big problem that we need to look at quite closely, together with the SARB, together with the government, to make sure that the targeting and the kind of influence that we do on the monetary policy, as well as any other influences on the inflation rate, is done in a way that positively influences this as well.
Thank you very much. Katlego, apologies, I didn't manage to get to another question for you. We're out of time. But thank you to all of you today for joining us. Dr. Mpumuzi Makaleni, Economics Lecturer at the University of the Western Cape, Zetu Trele, Financial Planner at Investec, and Katlego Kabela, Economics Lecturer at the University of Johannesburg.